When my grandmother passed away, I thought the only thing I'd lose was her. I had no idea my parents were about to steal $400,000 from her trust fund and turn my own sister against me to keep it hidden. My name is Alara Monroe, and my grandmother, Helen, was the kind of woman who made everyone feel loved. Her house always smelled like cinnamon and coffee, and she never let anyone leave without a hug. When she got sick, I spent as much time with her as I could. Even in her last days, she held my hand and whispered, "Family is everything, Alara. Take care of each other." Those were her last words to me, and they still echo in my mind. After the funeral, my parents, Diane and Russell, called Cora and me to meet at the lawyer's office. The room was quiet except for the sound of papers being shuffled. When the lawyer read the will and said Grandma had left a trust fund for both of us, $200,000 each, I didn't know what to say. I wasn't expecting anything from her. I just felt touched that she wanted to help us even after she was gone. My dad gave me a gentle pat on the shoulder. "We'll handle the paperwork, Alara," he said. "Trusts can be complicated. You don't need to worry about it." My mom smiled and nodded. "Let us take care of it, sweetheart. You've done enough. You need to rest." I believed them without question. I was grieving and tired, and they were my parents. I thought they had my best interests at heart. Cora, my younger sister, didn't seem too affected by any of it. She kept playing with her phone and said Grandma always wanted her to live freely. I tried not to take it personally. Grandma had loved us both, even if she and I had always been closer. The days that followed were heavy and slow. I went back to work and tried to keep busy, but I missed Grandma terribly. Her house stood empty, and every time I passed it, I felt a tightness in my chest. The only comfort I found was believing that she had left something behind for Cora and me to build better lives. A week later, I asked my parents if there was any news about the trust. My mom said everything was still processing, and that I shouldn't worry. My dad smiled again, that same calm, confident smile. "We'll make sure you're taken care of," he said. For a moment, I believed him. But as I looked at his face, I noticed something strange. His smile didn't reach his eyes. It was the first small crack in the picture-perfect family I thought I had. I didn't know it then, but that look was the beginning of everything falling apart. Weeks passed after the will reading, and life slowly returned to its quiet rhythm. I went back to my nursing shifts, trying to focus on work, but something kept bothering me. I hadn't heard anything more about Grandma's trust. My parents had said it was being handled, yet every time I asked, the answers became shorter and colder. One evening, while we were having dinner, I asked again if there was any update. My mom gave me a quick smile and said, "It's still being processed, Alara. These things take time." My dad didn't even look up from his plate. "Trusts aren't simple, you know," he muttered. Something in his tone made my stomach twist. It wasn't just impatience, it was avoidance. A few days later, I noticed something strange. My sister Cora, who had always complained about money, showed up at my apartment in a brand new car. It was a shiny silver convertible, the kind she'd always dreamed of but could never afford. I laughed nervously and asked how she managed to buy it. She flipped her hair and said, "Don't worry about it. I've got things handled now." That same week, I found out she had moved into a fancy condo downtown. The kind of place with glass balconies and ocean views. I called her to ask how she was paying for it, but she got defensive. "You're just jealous Grandma liked me more," she snapped before hanging up. I sat there in silence, holding my phone, feeling like someone had punched the air out of me. At first, I tried to convince myself there was an explanation. Maybe Grandma had left Cora something extra that I didn't know about. But deep down, I knew something wasn't right. Cora had always been impulsive, but this was different, too sudden, too perfect. And every time I brought up the trust to my parents, their voices turned sharp. One night, I couldn't sleep. I went downstairs to get a glass of water, and that's when I heard my parents' voices coming from the living room. They were whispering, but their words carried through the quiet house. "We need to make sure the accounts are clean," my dad said in a low voice. "We can't risk her finding out," my mom replied quickly. I froze behind the hallway wall, my heart pounding. Her. They were talking about me. I went back to my room and sat in the dark for a long time, trying to make sense of what I'd heard. Everything Grandma had trusted them with suddenly felt tainted. I couldn't shake the feeling that she had tried to protect us, and they had taken advantage of it. The next morning, I went to Grandma's old house to help sort through her things. While checking an old drawer in her writing desk, I found an envelope with my grandmother's handwriting on it. It said, For the girls, no one else. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside were several bank statements. And at the top of the first page, one line made my blood run cold. The trust had been transferred out, 2 days after Grandma's funeral. I sat in my car for a long time, staring at the papers in my hands. The bank statements were real. The money from Grandma's trust had been taken right after the funeral. My chest felt tight, my stomach twisting with anger and disbelief. I wanted to believe there was some mistake, that there was a reason for it. But deep down, I already knew who was behind it. That night, I drove to my parents' house. The lights were on, and I could see them sitting in the living room, watching TV like everything was fine. I walked straight in, holding the envelope. My mom looked surprised. My dad barely glanced up. "We need to talk," I said, my voice shaking. "Right now." My mom frowned, setting her cup down. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" she asked softly, but I could hear the tension under her words. I dropped the papers on the table. "You stole the trust money," I said. "I found the bank records. Grandma left that for Cora and me, not for you." My mom's face went pale. My dad leaned back, his expression turning hard. For a moment, no one spoke. Then my mom started to cry. "You don't understand what we've been through, Alara," she said. "We needed that money. The bills, the house, everything. We were drowning." I stared at her, stunned. "So you just took it? Without even telling us? Grandma trusted you." She reached for my hand, but I pulled away. My dad's voice cut through the room, low and cold. "That money was part of our retirement plan," he said. "We've spent our whole lives taking care of you girls. You'll thank us one day when you realize what we had to do." "Thank you," I said, my voice cracking. "You lied to me. You forged my name. You made me believe you were protecting me." My dad didn't flinch. He just stared at me, his eyes empty. My mom kept crying, saying things like, "We didn't have a choice, and you're overreacting." Before I could say anything else, Cora walked in from the kitchen. She had been listening. Her arms were crossed, her face tight. "What's going on?" she asked. I looked at her, hoping she'd understand. "They took the trust money, Cora. Grandma's money. I have proof." She shook her head and laughed bitterly. "You're making trouble again, Alara. You can't stand it when things don't go your way." "Cora, I'm not lying," I pleaded. "Look at the papers." But she didn't even glance at them. She turned to our parents and said, "You don't deserve this kind of stress." Something inside me broke then. I felt like the floor had fallen out from under me. My own sister didn't believe me. My parents looked at me like I was the problem. I grabbed the envelope and walked out the door, tears burning my eyes. The cool night air hit my face, but it didn't calm me. I sat in my car, shaking, staring at the dark house I had called home my whole life. I whispered to myself, "They took everything from her, and now they're trying to destroy me too." That night, I made myself a promise. I was going to find out everything they'd done, no matter how much it hurt. The morning after I left my parents' house, I sat at my kitchen table with the envelope in front of me. My eyes were swollen from crying, and I hadn't slept. Every time I thought about my parents' faces, cold, unbothered, it made me sick. I knew I couldn't deal with this alone anymore. There was only one person I could trust now, Grandma's lawyer, Mr. Avery Kane. He had known her for years, even before I was born. I found his number on one of Grandma's old letters and called him. My voice shook as I explained who I was. When I mentioned the trust, he went quiet. Then he said gently, "Come by my office, Alara. We'll look into this together." When I got there, he greeted me with a warm handshake, though I could tell he was worried. I showed him the bank papers I had found. He looked through them carefully, frowning deeper with every page. "Your parents told me they were handling the trust on your behalf," he said slowly. "I assumed you agreed to it." I stared at him, confused. I never agreed to anything. They told me they'd just handle the legal work. I didn't sign anything. He looked up sharply. "That's strange," he said, "because according to the documents I filed, there's a form with your signature on it. It gives your parents full control of the trust." My hands went cold. "That's impossible. I never signed that." Mr. Kane stood and went to a filing cabinet. He pulled out a thick folder with my grandmother's name on it. Inside were copies of every form, every signature. When he laid them out on the desk, I saw it. My name written neatly in black ink, exactly the way I sign it, but something was off. The loops in the letters, the spacing, it wasn't mine. He stared at it for a long time, then sighed heavily. "Alara, this isn't your handwriting," he said. "This looks like a forgery." My heart pounded in my chest. I felt dizzy, like the air had been sucked out of the room. "So they forged my name," I whispered. "They actually faked my signature to steal Grandma's money." Mr. Kane nodded slowly, his face tight with anger. "It appears so. They also filed an amendment to the trust a few weeks before your grandmother passed away. It changed the terms, gave them the right to manage the funds however they saw fit. Your name was used to approve it." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My parents hadn't just taken the money, they had planned it. They had lied, forged my signature, and made it look like I gave them permission. Tears filled my eyes, but this time they weren't from sadness. It was rage. The people who raised me, the ones I trusted the most, had not only stolen from Grandma but also from me. They had betrayed us both. Mr. Kane put a hand on my shoulder. "Ilara, I'll help you," he said quietly. "But you need to prepare yourself. This won't be easy." I nodded, gripping the papers in my hands. "I don't care," I said. "I just want the truth." I waited a few days before going to see Cora. I needed time to calm down, but the anger never really left me. I hoped that if I showed her the proof, she would finally understand what our parents had done. She deserved to know the truth. When I arrived at her condo, she opened the door looking annoyed, her hair perfect, her nails done, and music playing in the background. I held the papers in my hand and said quietly, "Cora, we need to talk." She sighed but let me in. I sat on the edge of her fancy couch and handed her the documents. "These are from Grandma's lawyer. Mom and Dad forged my signature and changed the trust. They took the money." She glanced at the papers but didn't really read them. "Ilara, come on," she said, rolling her eyes. "You're overreacting again. Mom and Dad said you've been accusing them of crazy things because you're upset about Grandma." I felt my throat tighten. "This isn't about feelings, Cora. Look at the papers. The bank statements. The lawyer confirmed it. They lied to us." But she crossed her arms. "You always think you're the only one Grandma cared about. Maybe you just can't stand that she trusted Mom and Dad more. You're just trying to take my half." Her words hit me like a slap. "I don't want your half," I said. "I just want the truth." She stood up and pointed at the door. "You should go. I don't want to be part of your drama." I left her place feeling hollow. On the drive home, I kept wondering how easily she could believe them over me. Maybe it was easier for her to think I was the problem. Maybe she didn't want to lose the comfort they gave her. In the days that followed, everything got worse. My parents began calling me less, and when they did, it was always cold. I could tell they had talked to Cora. They were feeding her lies, saying I was greedy, that I'd never appreciated Grandma, that I wanted everything for myself. Family dinners became unbearable. My mom would sit there with fake tears, saying things like, "We just want peace in this family," while Cora glared at me from across the table. My dad would stay quiet, his eyes sharp, waiting for me to snap. Every word felt like walking on broken glass. I started spending more time alone. My phone barely rang anymore. Cora stopped answering my messages completely. When I passed by the house, I saw the curtains close like they didn't want to see me. The home I grew up in didn't feel like mine anymore. One night, I sat in my car outside my parents' house, just staring at the windows glowing softly in the dark. I thought about Grandma's words, "Take care of each other." I finally understood that in our family, love wasn't freely given. It was traded, used, and taken away when it no longer served them. For the first time in my life, I realized I was completely alone. Months passed, and the silence between my family and me grew heavier. Every day felt like walking through thick fog, uncertain and lonely. I tried to stay focused on work, but even there, I couldn't stop thinking about what they had done. My parents pretended I didn't exist, and Cora still wouldn't answer my calls. I kept hoping something would change, but deep down, I knew it wouldn't. One evening, I came home from my shift and found a white envelope taped to my door. My stomach sank when I saw the words eviction notice. My name was on it, but so were my parents. They had been co-signers when I moved into the apartment a few years ago. I called the landlord immediately, and he told me they had pulled their financial support without warning. I hung up and sat on the floor, staring at the notice. They had taken everything else from me, and now they were taking my home too. It wasn't about money anymore. It was about control. They wanted to break me completely. A week later, Cora invited me to a family dinner. Against my better judgment, I went. I told myself maybe she wanted to make peace. When I arrived, everyone was already there, my parents, Cora, and a few relatives. For a moment, I thought maybe things could still be fixed. But as soon as I sat down, I realized I was wrong. Cora started talking loudly about me, telling everyone how I had turned against the family and made up lies to get attention. My parents didn't stop her. They nodded along, pretending to be the victims. I felt my face burn as everyone stared. My heart pounded in my chest. I stood up and said quietly, "You know what? You can all believe whatever you want." My mom started crying, my dad rolled his eyes, and Cora smirked like she had won. I walked out of the house without another word. Outside, the air was cold and sharp, but it felt cleaner than the air inside that room. When I got home, I packed a small bag and sat by the window. I cried, not because I still wanted their love, but because I finally understood that it was never real. It was love with strings attached, love that only lasted as long as I obeyed them. The next morning, I called Mr. Kane. I told him everything, about the eviction, the dinner, all of it. He listened quietly and then said, "Alara, you have enough proof to take legal action. But you need to know this will destroy your family." I stared at the wall for a long time before answering. My voice came out calm and steady. "They already did that." When I hung up, I felt something I hadn't felt in months, clarity. The pain was still there, but beneath it was strength. I realized I didn't need their approval anymore. They could take the house, the money, even my name if they wanted. But they couldn't take away the truth. Filing the lawsuit was the hardest decision I had ever made. Even after everything they had done, part of me still wanted to believe my parents would come to their senses and admit the truth. But they never did. With Mr. Kane's help, I filed charges against them for embezzlement and fraud. Once the papers were served, the quiet between us turned into open war. At first, I tried not to think about what it meant. I told myself it was just about justice, about clearing Grandma's name and protecting what she left behind. But deep down, I knew it was also about finally standing up for myself. My parents had taken everything they could, my trust, my home, my sister. And this was the only way I could take something back. When the court dates were set, I felt sick. The thought of sitting across from them made my stomach turn. Cora refused to talk to me at all, but a few weeks later, she was subpoenaed to testify. She didn't have a choice. The day of the hearing, I sat in the courtroom beside Mr. Kane. My parents were on the other side, dressed neatly, pretending to be calm. My mother's eyes darted everywhere, but toward me. My father sat still, his jaw tight. When Cora walked in, she looked terrified. She avoided my eyes too. The first few witnesses were from the bank and the law firm that handled Grandma's will. They showed documents, signatures, and transaction dates. Each one was like another knife in my chest. It became clear that my parents had changed the trust paperwork months before Grandma died. They had forged my signature and moved the money into their personal account. Then came the worst part, hearing what they had done with it. The accountant's report showed everything. They used part of the money to pay off debts, remodeled their house, and even invested in a boutique business under Cora's name. It was like watching every lie they had told unravel one by one. When my mother took the stand, she tried to keep up her calm act, but it didn't last. She cried and said they only did it to protect the family. She begged me with tearful eyes, "Please, Alara, drop this. We can fix it. We're still family." I didn't say a word. I just sat there, staring at her. Every memory I had of her, every birthday, every hug, every "I love you," felt fake now. My father didn't cry. He just sat with his arms crossed, like none of this mattered. When the lawyers finished questioning them, the courtroom went silent. I could feel everyone watching me, waiting to see if I would say something. But there was nothing left to say. I didn't want revenge anymore. I only wanted the truth to stand on record. As the judge announced the decision to move forward with the charges, my parents' faces fell apart. My mother sobbed openly, and for a moment, I almost pitied her. Almost. But then I remembered what they had done. I sat still, my hands folded, my heart cold and steady. The people who raised me had destroyed themselves, and all I could do was watch it happen. When the verdict came, I didn't feel anything at first. The judge ruled in my favor. My parents were found guilty of fraud and ordered to return what they could, but most of the money was gone. They lost their home, their savings, and their reputation. The courtroom was silent except for my mother's quiet sobs. My father just stared straight ahead, his face gray and empty. People said I should have felt relieved. I had fought for the truth and won. But as I walked out of the courthouse, all I felt was a strange emptiness. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like something had died inside me along with everything we had lost as a family. A few days later, Cora came to collect her things from her condo. She didn't even look at me. When I tried to speak, she cut me off. "You ruined everything," she said coldly. "You destroyed our family. Are you happy now?" Her words stung, but I didn't argue. There was no point. She had made her choice. Maybe one day she would see the truth, but I didn't need her to anymore. I watched her drive away, and for the first time, I didn't cry. I just stood there quietly, feeling the last piece of my old life fade. The house my parents had loved so much was sold a month later. I drove by once and saw strangers moving in, carrying boxes through the open door. The garden Grandma used to sit in was overgrown and empty. It hurt to look at, so I didn't go back again. When everything was finally settled, I went to the cemetery. The air was still, and the grass was wet with morning dew. I knelt by Grandma's grave and placed fresh flowers down. For a long time, I didn't say anything. Then I whispered, "You warned me, Grandma. You told me they'd eat each other alive." A soft breeze moved through the trees, and for a moment, I imagined she was there beside me. I realized then that this was her final test, not about money, but about truth. She had trusted me to protect what mattered, even if it meant losing everyone else. As I stood to leave, I looked back once more. The pain was still there, but it felt quieter now. I had done what was right, even if it broke my heart. Grandma's legacy was safe, but my family was gone, and I had to live with both truths. Months passed after the trial, and the noise around my family slowly faded. People stopped talking about it, and life went on for everyone else. For me, it was quiet, too quiet. I went to work, came home, and kept to myself. I didn't check social media, didn't visit the old neighborhood, and didn't hear from Cora. It was like she had vanished from my life completely. Then one evening, I heard a knock at my door. When I opened it, Cora stood there. She looked nothing like the sister I remembered. Her hair was messy, her eyes red, and she was shaking from the cold. She tried to smile, but her lips trembled. "Can I come in?" she asked softly. I stepped aside and let her in. She sat on the couch, clutching her bag like it was the only thing she owned. For a while, we didn't speak. Then she broke the silence. "I lost everything," she said. "Mom and Dad told me they'd help me. They said if I stood by them, they'd make sure I'd be taken care of. But after the case, they cut me off. They said it was all my fault." Her voice cracked as she talked. "I believed them, Alara. They made me think you were the enemy. They told me you wanted everything for yourself. I was stupid. I just wanted them to love me." I listened quietly, my hands folded in my lap. Part of me wanted to feel sorry for her, but another part of me couldn't forget what she had done. The things she said, the way she looked at me like I was a stranger. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she leaned forward. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I was wrong. I should have believed you. Please, please forgive me." Her words hung in the air. I wanted to believe she meant them, but forgiveness didn't come easily. I looked at her and said quietly, "You helped them bury me, Cora." She broke down completely, covering her face with her hands. I sat there, calm but tired. After a long silence, I went to my room and came back with a check. I placed it on the table between us. "Take it," I said. "It's half of what's left of Grandma's trust." She stared at it, shaking her head. "I don't deserve this," she said. "I know," I replied softly. "But Grandma would have wanted you to eat." Cora took the check with trembling hands. She looked at me one last time, tears streaming down her face. "I don't know how to fix this," she said. "You can't," I answered. "Some things just stay broken." She stood and walked toward the door. Before leaving, she turned back as if she wanted to say something else, but no words came. I watched her step out into the night, her figure fading into the darkness. When the door closed, the silence returned. For the first time, I didn't feel anger or sadness, just peace. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was enough. I moved to a small coastal town far away from everything that reminded me of my family. I wanted a place where no one knew my name or my story. The air there smelled of salt and rain, and the sound of the waves made it easier to breathe. I bought a small house near the shore using part of the money I got back. It wasn't much, but it was enough for me. For the first time in years, I felt safe. My days became simple. I worked at a small clinic, took long walks by the ocean, and watched the sunset from my porch every evening. The water glowed orange and gold as the light faded, and I would sit quietly, letting the sound of the sea wash away the noise in my head. I didn't hear from my parents. I didn't hear from Cora either. The silence felt strange at first, but after a while, I started to welcome it. Sometimes, when the nights were quiet, I thought about everything that had happened. I had learned that telling the truth doesn't always bring peace. It brings loss too. I had uncovered the truth, but it had cost me my family, my trust, and the years I could never get back. They stole money, yes, but what they really took was time. I kept a small box in my room that held the few things left from my grandmother. Inside it was a photo of me and Cora as little girls and her old silver locket. I used to open it and look at our smiling faces, wondering how things had gone so wrong. Grandma had always said that love without honesty never lasts. I didn't understand it then, but now I did. I would sometimes talk to her picture and say softly, "You were right, Grandma. They took more than money." I missed her voice, her calm, and the way she made everything feel safe. One evening, I stood by the window and closed the locket, placing it gently on the sill where the light from the setting sun touched it. I watched it shine for a moment before the room grew dim. "They stole money," I whispered, "but what they really took was time, the kind I'll never get back." Then I turned away, letting the sound of the waves fill the silence. I didn't win. I just survived them.